Deadstock fabric. It's the latest popular buzzword in sustainable fashion, but is it really a sustainable solution or just a clever marketing trick? Today we're digging into the truth behind this so-called eco-friendly fabric, while I also sew a pair of trousers out of this fabric for my first fashion collection. By the end of today's episode, we'll have a finished pair of trousers, and we'll have a discussion about the messy reality that is Deadstock fabric and its impact on sustainability in the fashion industry. Oh, and let's not forget, we still have one very big open question. Can I actually finish this 12 look collection in 13 weeks, considering there's only 4 weeks left? So what is deadstock? According to the Oxford Dictionary, deadstock is any good or stock that remains unsold or for which there is no market. When we talk about deadstock clothing, there's actually a great analogy, and that's military surplus. Military clothing that was made but then was never used, and so it's leftover stock essentially that has no purpose. But you know, surplus doesn't quite have that sustainable ring to it, does it? But that's essentially what it is. So we're tackling this trouser concept I've been going on and on about. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to widen a trouser pattern that I have already, and then shorten the rise, so make them a little bit lower waisted, and then have the waist kind of come out so that it folds in and then has like a faux waist with some sort of a thing on top. So we'll see how that goes. When it comes to deadstock fabric, we are talking about fabric that has been made for a brand or a designer but didn't end up getting used. Now, the way that deadstock has entered more of the mainstream is as a sustainability solution, because of what would happen to the stock if it wasn't used. Unfortunately, in a lot of instances, the material would actually get destroyed, like burned or something like that, which is pretty awful. The other sustainable component is the opportunity cost environmentally of not making new fabric. There's already sunk costs of what it took to make that fabric, to dye it, all of those things, whether environmentally friendly or not. So you're probably already thinking, well, like, is deadstock even that sustainable then? And that's a really good question. I've said before that most of my fabric is deadstock. And if the reality of deadstock material is so messy, why do I use it? And here's the thing, there is actually a huge benefit to small designers with the emergence of brands being willing to sell excess material directly to other businesses, such as my use case here. This deadstock that I have isn't just your normal fabric. Nona Source specifically has a lot of material from couture houses, material that was custom made for collections. It's pretty limited in the amount that they actually have left over, which is really lovely for a smaller designer like myself who doesn't need thousands of meters of something. And then the other great thing about it is it gives me access to material that I otherwise would not be able to work with, first from a price standpoint, and in order to get this unique fabric made, usually that would require you purchase a certain quantity, which I'm just not going to be able to do. But having unique fabric, for example, this material actually has metal in it. So much fun to work with. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot with deadstock. Almost everything that I've gotten is all dry clean only. Sometimes your material composition isn't perfectly clear. You don't know exactly how a fabric is going to behave, but there always are those little considerations when you are buying deadstock. And so it's luxurious, it's unpredictable to work with, but does that still mean it's sustainable. So this material is a super chunky tweed. So chunky, in fact, that whether or not it will do what I want it to from a design standpoint is still kind of a question mark in my head. The buzz term of deadstock fabric isn't something that only designers like myself have to contend with. Have you ever been shopping and seen a sign that said made with deadstock materials and thought, oh wow, I'm being so sustainable? Or maybe you bought fabric for a sewing project that was deadstock. And I'm curious about that experience too. Did it live up to your expectations, or did you run into weird quirks like I did? And here's the big question. Do we actually think brands are reducing waste by selling all of their dead stock? Or is it basically just a marketing trick that has either made it so they no longer have the cost penalty, I guess, of overproducing a material? Or maybe they're even producing more fabric to be able to sell it as dead stock, which is a pretty horrifying thought. Drop your thoughts below. I'm curious if you've ever paused to question one of those labels. I want to know your thoughts. My biggest concern around deadstock material is that it can be both, I think. It can be both something that is a great resource for small designers and truly is a certain amount of excess that otherwise wouldn't have a place to go. But if deadstock is truly material without a market, now there is a market. Disturbingly, this actually reminds me of back when I worked in corporate retail and there was the rise of this thing called the off-price market. So think about like your Marshalls, your Nordstrom Rack, which were businesses that grew out of what happens to this clothing after you've marked it down, it hasn't sold, it's sitting there at the end of the season. These off-price retailers popped up to sell off that excess stock that was left over. But like, you know, anything that's a trend in the fashion industry, it became a money-making machine. Customers loved it. And then the demand far outstripped what was actually left over at the end of the season. Then retailers had to go out and actually work with brands to get them to produce more. They didn't have enough leftover stock, so they would negotiate to make new things just for this new market. But it sounds familiar, doesn't it? We now have a market for this excess, so why not make more excess to be able to sell on that market? You're just taking people who wanted a more sustainable option, so they're buying leftovers. But then what happened to the original stuff? It really just shifts what we're buying, and so trying to just inflate this market is what feels like might happen, but it's just a terrible idea. We've done this before. It's like, how many more times do we have to do this before we realize that like this is not the right solution? This is definitely one of the less glamorous parts of solo designing. There's nobody to help you with checking a hem, just me, a lot of pins, and honestly a lot of trial and error. I'm specifically trying to create a tailored silhouette with a bit of flexibility to it that has a really low rise. I have this extra wide panel that will allow me to take a really deep pleat here in the front. I've already attached the pockets really nicely to the side because we always have time for pockets. Trying to not sit on needles is always a good objective as well. When you're using yourself as a fit model, it means lots of pinning, unpinning, trying not to stab yourself. And of course, lots of trips back and forth to the sewing machine. Designing trousers specifically isn't just about cutting and sewing. It's about really sculpting to fit the body. It's important that they fit perfectly because that's the reason to design a different trouser. Otherwise, it's like, it's been done before. So the fit and those little details really matter. Trousers are one of those things where you really have to make them a lot to learn how to do them correctly. But I love trousers so much, especially for women. I love the fit, I love the feel. And so it's something that I have spent so much time learning how to do well. And it definitely pays off when it's just me trying to make this happen in a short period of time. There's a Maya Angelou quote, "Do the best you can until you know better, then do better." But when it comes to sustainable fashion, it's even just in that knowing better that's really the problem. I mean, whether you're trying to buy clothes or you're trying to buy fabric, no big fashion house or brand is staying up at night trying to make sure that you're educated on whether their messaging is greenwashing or is actually sustainable. It's really up to us, unfortunately, to try to educate ourselves and then share that education. So if you learned something today, please share it with a friend. And if you have any other questions about Deadstock fabric or garments or anything like that, leave them in the comments. I'm sure someone in our community would love to share that information, even if I don't have the answer, which I might not. One pair of trousers down and only 11 more looks to go. In 3 more weeks, no team to help me out, no real safety net here. I guess there's no real guarantee that I'm actually gonna meet this goal that I set for myself. But here's the thing, I didn't quit my corporate job and teach myself all of these things about fashion design just to play it safe. The clock is definitely ticking, and next week, the look that we're gonna be working on, it's ambitious. And honestly, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to pull it off, but that's half the fun, right? Self-taught doesn't mean small dreams in any way, shape, or form. You won't wanna miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you next Monday. This collection isn't done yet, and neither am I.